When $350,000 can get your entire family killed, what would you do? Evelyn Carter had no choice but to marry a stranger, a cold, calculating financier who offered to erase her brother's deadly debt in exchange for 2 years of her life. What started as a desperate transaction turned into something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. This is a story of survival, secrets, and a love that neither of them saw coming. If you're ready to dive into this journey with me, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The call came on a Tuesday. Evelyn Carter was bent over Mrs. Harrison's swollen knee, working the joint through its limited range of motion when her phone buzzed against the treatment table. She ignored it. Mrs. Harrison had been her patient for 3 months now, post-surgery rehabilitation that was slow but steady, and Evelyn never interrupted a session for anything less than an emergency. The phone buzzed again. Then again. "You should get that, dear," Mrs. Harrison said, her face tight with concern that had nothing to do with her knee. Evelyn's stomach dropped before she even looked at the screen. 6 missed calls. All from her father. She pulled off her gloves with shaking hands. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrison. I need to—" "Go. Go." She stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights of the clinic suddenly too bright, too harsh. Her father never called during the day. Never called more than once unless something was catastrophically wrong. "Dad? Evie?" His voice cracked, and she knew. She knew before he said another word that whatever came next would split her life into before and after. "It's your brother." The floor tilted beneath her feet. "What happened? Is he hurt? He's alive. But Evie, he's in trouble. Bad trouble." She pressed her forehead against the cool wall, trying to breathe through the sudden tightness in her chest. Marcus. Her baby brother, who was 26 but still felt like the kid who used to hide behind her legs during thunderstorms. Marcus, who'd dropped out of college 2 years ago and disappeared into a life she didn't recognize, who showed up at Christmas with hollow eyes and promises he never kept. What kind of trouble? The pause lasted too long. "Dad, what kind of trouble?" "Debt. He owes money to some very dangerous people. $350,000. The number didn't make sense. It was too big, too impossible. Evelyn made $38,000 a year as a physical therapist at a community clinic in South Boston. Her father was on disability after a stroke last year, had left his right side weak and his speech sometimes slurred. Their family savings, what little had existed, was gone, eaten up by medical bills and the second mortgage they'd taken out to keep the house. $350,000 might as well have been $3 million. "That's not possible," she whispered. "How could he—" "Gambling, underground poker games, sports betting, things I don't understand. He thought he could win it back, kept doubling down. And the people he borrowed from—" Her father's voice broke completely. "Evie, they came to the house today." Ice flooded her veins. "What?" 2 men. They were very polite, very calm. They said Marcus has 2 weeks to pay in full, or they'll start taking collateral. They said they know you work at the clinic on Dorchester Street. They said they know you leave at 6:30 every Tuesday and Thursday for your evening shift at the nursing home. They said—" He was crying now. This man who'd raised 2 kids alone after their mother died, who'd worked double shifts at the plant until his body gave out. They said families share debts. Evelyn's legs gave out. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold linoleum, phone pressed so hard against her ear it hurt. "Where's Marcus now?" "I don't know. He left yesterday. Won't answer his phone." "Evie, what are we going to do?" She didn't have an answer. She sat there in the hallway of the clinic where she'd worked for 4 years, surrounded by motivational posters about perseverance and healing, and had absolutely no idea what to do. "I'll figure something out," she heard herself say. "Don't worry, Dad, I'll fix this." She had no idea how, but what else could she say? The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of panic and desperate mathematics. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table every night with a yellow legal pad, writing down numbers that never added up to anything close to enough. Her savings? $4,200. Her father's savings? $800. The equity in the house, maybe $30,000 if they could sell it fast, which would leave her father homeless. Her car? 8 years old, worth maybe $3,000. She called her aunt in Providence, who hung up when she heard the amount. She looked into personal loans and laughed bitterly at the interest rates, at the idea that anyone would loan that kind of money to someone with her income and credit score. She went to the bank anyway. The loan officer was young, probably fresh out of college, with a sympathetic smile that made Evelyn want to scream. "I'm afraid without collateral or a co-signer, we can't approve anything over $5,000, he said, sliding her application back across the desk. "Have you considered a payment plan with your creditor?" "They're not that kind of creditor." The smile faltered. "I see. Well, I'm very sorry, but there's nothing we can do." She walked out into the cold November afternoon, feeling like she was drowning in open air. Marcus finally called on day 4. She answered on the first ring. "Where the hell are you?" "I'm sorry." His voice was small, wrecked. "Evie, I'm so sorry. I didn't think what—" "You didn't think? You didn't think that borrowing $350,000 from criminals might have consequences. I was going to win it back. I had a system. I just needed a system." She laughed, high and slightly hysterical. "You had a system. Well, congratulations, your system worked great. Now Dad has men showing up at the house, and I'm being followed to work, and we have 10 days to come up with money we'll never have. So tell me, Marcus, what does your system say we should do now?" Silence. "I'll turn myself in," he whispered. "I'll go to the police." "And tell them what? That you gambled away money you borrowed from loan sharks? They'll laugh you out of the station. These people don't leave paper trails, Marcus. They don't take you to court. They just make you disappear." "Then what? What am I supposed to do?" Evelyn closed her eyes. She was standing in the parking lot of the clinic, cold wind cutting through her scrubs. "I don't know, but you need to stay hidden. Don't come home. Don't contact Dad. I'll figure something out." "How?" "I don't know." The words came out as a shout. A nurse leaving the building glanced over, concerned. Evelyn lowered her voice. "I don't know, but I will. Just stay alive, Marcus. Can you do that? Can you just stay alive for 2 weeks? Evie?" She hung up. That night, a black sedan parked across from her apartment. It was still there in the morning. On day 6, Evelyn came home to find her door unlocked. Nothing was taken. Nothing was disturbed. But someone had been inside. She could feel it in the wrongness of the air, in the way her bookshelf looked just slightly off-center. They'd left a message on her bathroom mirror, written in what looked like lipstick. 9 days. She didn't sleep that night, or the next. On day 8, she was cleaning up after her last patient when Dr. Chen, the clinic director, called her into his office. He was sitting behind his desk with an expression she'd never seen before, uncomfortable, almost guilty. "Evelyn, I need to talk to you about something." She knew before he said it. "We've had some concerns raised about your current personal situation. Some of our patients have expressed discomfort, and given the nature of our clientele, many of them elderly, vulnerable, we feel it's necessary to put you on administrative leave until things are resolved. You're firing me." "Not firing, leave. Unpaid, unfortunately, but your position will be here when—" "When what? When the men who are threatening my family decide to go away? When I magically come up with $350,000? Dr. Chen had the decency to look ashamed. "I'm sorry, I really am. But I have to think about the safety of everyone here." She cleaned out her locker in silence, 20 minutes of her life packed into a canvas bag. 4 years of patient relationships, of small victories and slow progress, erased because she'd had the bad luck to be related to a desperate idiot. The black sedan followed her home. 7 days left. Evelyn stopped eating. Food sat in her stomach like concrete, and she couldn't afford to waste money on groceries anyway. She spent her days making calls that went nowhere, sending emails that got no response, researching bankruptcy laws that wouldn't help because you couldn't bankrupt your way out of a debt that didn't legally exist. At night, she lay awake calculating impossible equations. If she worked 3 jobs for the next 10 years, saved every penny, never got sick, never had an emergency, it still wouldn't be enough. 6 days left. Her father called crying. Someone had slashed his tires. When he called the police, they took a report and told him there wasn't much they could do about random vandalism. The officer had looked at him with eyes that said he knew it wasn't random, that he knew exactly what was happening, and that there was nothing anyone could do about it. 5 days left. Evelyn was sitting in her car outside the nursing home, trying to gather the energy to go inside for a shift she no longer had, when someone tapped on her window. She jumped, heart hammering, and turned to see a woman in an expensive coat standing in the rain. The woman made a gesture. Roll down the window. Every instinct screamed at Evelyn to drive away. Instead, she cracked the window an inch. Evelyn Carter? Who's asking? My name is Grace Montgomery. I work for someone who'd like to help you with your current situation. The woman's voice was cultured, professional, completely at odds with the seedy nursing home parking lot. He's authorized me to make you an offer. I don't want anything from whoever you work for. I think you'll want to hear this offer. He's prepared to pay your brother's debt in full, all $350,000 plus any additional interest or fees. In exchange, he asks for 2 years of your time. Evelyn stared at her. What? 2 years as his wife. A legal marriage with specific terms and conditions, all outlined in a contract. At the end of 2 years, you'll be granted a divorce and a settlement of $1 million. Your brother's debt will be cleared immediately upon signing. You're insane. I'm serious. Grace pulled a business card from her pocket and held it through the crack in the window. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Grace Montgomery, Private Counsel. Mr. Drake is a very private man with very specific needs. He requires a wife for personal and professional reasons. He's offering you a solution to an impossible problem. All he asks in return is your discretion and your commitment to the terms of the contract. Why me? You fit the profile he's looking for. You're intelligent, educated, attractive, but not ostentatious. You have no criminal record, no history of substance abuse, no social media presence worth mentioning. You're in desperate need of money, but you're not desperate enough to have done anything illegal yet. And most importantly, you have something to lose, which means you can be trusted to honor the terms. Evelyn's hands were shaking. This is insane. This doesn't happen in real life. And yet, here I am, offering you a way out. Grace tilted her head. You have 4 days to come up with $350,000, Miss Carter. Do you have any other options? No, she didn't, and they both knew it. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, the offer expires. Grace pushed the card through the window. There's a number on the back. When you're ready to discuss the details, call it. She walked away, disappearing into the rain like something from a fever dream. Evelyn sat in her car for 2 hours, staring at the card. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a trap, a scam, something worse than the debt itself. You didn't marry strangers. You didn't sign away 2 years of your life to a man you'd never met. This was the plot of a bad movie, not something that happened to physical therapists from South Boston. But 4 days. She had 4 days to save her family. She called her father. Dad, if there was a way to fix everything, but it meant doing something crazy, something that would change my whole life, would you want me to do it? Evelyn, what are you talking about? She told him. All of it. The woman, the offer, the impossible promise. When she finished, there was a long silence. Baby girl, you can't sell yourself like that. I'm not selling myself. It's a contract, a job. It's marriage. It's a business arrangement. 2 years and we're all safe. Marcus is safe. You're safe. The house is safe. And at the end, I get $1 million. We could actually have a future, Dad, a real one. What kind of man buys a wife? The kind who can pay $350,000 without blinking. The kind who has lawyers who carry business cards that probably cost more than my car. Does it matter what kind of man he is if it saves us? Yes. Her father's voice was firm despite the tears she could hear behind it. Yes, it matters. Because you matter, Evie. You're not a bargaining chip. You're my daughter. And Marcus is your son. Are we just going to let him die because I'm too proud to sign a contract? No answer. Dad, I'm doing this. I just wanted you to know. She hung up before he could argue anymore. 3 days left. Evelyn called the number at 7 in the morning. Grace answered on the second ring, as if she'd been waiting. I want to meet him first, Evelyn said. Before I agree to anything, I need to meet this man who thinks he can buy a wife. Of course, tonight at 8. I'll text you the address. The address turned out to be a restaurant in the Back Bay, the kind of place Evelyn had walked past 100 times but never entered because a single appetizer cost more than her weekly grocery budget. She stood outside for 5 minutes, looking down at her only dress, a simple black thing she'd bought for a funeral 3 years ago, and feeling like an imposter. A man in a suit opened the door for her. "Miss Carter? This way, please." He led her through the main dining room, past tables of beautiful people eating beautiful food, to a private room in the back. The door opened, and Evelyn got her first look at the man who wanted to buy 2 years of her life. Nathaniel Drake was not what she expected. She'd imagined someone older, softer, the kind of middle-aged businessman who needed to purchase companionship because his personality couldn't secure it. Instead, the man who stood as she entered was maybe 35, tall and lean in a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that was handsome in a cold, precise way, like something carved from marble by someone who understood anatomy but not warmth. "Miss Carter." His voice matched his face, controlled, measured, empty of anything resembling emotion. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." She sat because her legs were shaking. I assume Grace explained the basic terms. "She said you'd pay my brother's debt if I marry you for 2 years. "Correct. The full amount will be transferred to his creditors the day after our wedding. You'll receive a settlement of $1 million upon successful completion of the contract period. In exchange, you'll live as my wife, attend social and professional functions as needed, and maintain the appearance of a legitimate marriage." "Why?" One eyebrow rose slightly. "Why what? Why do you need a wife? If you have this kind of money, you could have anyone. So why buy one?" "Because everyone I could have, as you put it, comes with complications. Expectations, emotions. I don't have time for the mess of a real relationship. What I need is someone who understands that this is a transaction, who'll do what's required and leave when the time comes. Someone motivated by necessity rather than romance. You want a prostitute. I want a wife. There's a difference. I'm not interested in sex, Miss Carter. I'm interested in appearances. My business dealings require a certain image, stability, tradition, family values. A wife provides that image. The contract includes clauses about separate bedrooms, personal privacy, and mutual respect. You'll be compensated generously for your time and discretion. That's all." Evelyn stared at him. "You're serious?" "I don't make jokes about business. This isn't business. This is my life. For 2 years. After that, your life is yours again, except significantly improved financially." He leaned back, studying her with those flat, assessing eyes. "I've read your file, Miss Carter. You work 2 jobs that barely keep you above poverty. You have student loan debt from a degree you'll spend 20 years paying off. Your father is one medical emergency away from losing his house. Your brother is about to get himself killed over a gambling debt. I'm offering you a way out of all of it. The question is whether you're practical enough to take it." Practical. The word tasted bitter. "Is that what you call selling yourself?" "I call it making a strategic decision based on available options. You have 4 days to save your family. I'm offering you a solution. Everything else is sentiment, and sentiment doesn't pay off debt." He was right, and she hated him for it. "What about after?" she asked. "After 2 years, when we divorce, what stops people from thinking I was just a gold digger who married you for money?" A carefully crafted narrative about irreconcilable differences and mutual respect. "My PR team is very good at their job. You'll come out of this looking sympathetic, not opportunistic." He slid a folder across the table. "The full contract. Take it home. Read it. Have a lawyer review it if you want, though I doubt you can afford one who will understand the nuances. You have until tomorrow evening to decide." Evelyn picked up the folder with numb hands. It was heavy, the weight of 2 years compressed into legal language. "Why me?" she asked again. "Specifically me." "You're drowning," Nathaniel said simply. "Drowning people don't ask questions. They just grab whatever's offered. That makes you perfect." She should have been offended. Instead, she just felt tired. "I'll read it." "Good. Grace will be in touch tomorrow for your answer." He stood, clearly dismissing her. Evelyn stood too, clutching the folder. Mr. Drake, if I do this, if I sign your contract and play your wife, don't ever confuse my desperation for weakness. I'm doing this for my family, not because I'm afraid of you. For the first time, something flickered in those dead eyes. It might have been surprise, or it might have been respect. Noted. She left without another word. At home, Evelyn spread the contract across her kitchen table. 47 pages of dense legal text that basically outlined 2 years of her life in excruciating detail. Separate living quarters, monthly allowance for clothing and personal expenses, required attendance at a minimum of 15 social events per year, no fraternization with other men in public, no discussion of the contract terms with anyone, a non-disclosure agreement that would cost her everything if she violated it. Grounds for immediate termination of the contract, all of which seemed designed to protect him, none of which protected her. And at the end, $1 million tax-free. She read it 3 times. Then she called Marcus. I found a way to fix everything, she told him, but you need to know what it's costing me. She told him about Nathaniel Drake, about the contract, the marriage, the 2 years of her life she was about to sell. Marcus listened in silence. Don't do this, he whispered when she finished. Evie, don't. I'll figure something else out. I'll run. I'll disappear. Just don't. You'll die. Then I'll die. That's on me. This isn't. You're my brother. This is exactly on me. She was crying now, tears dripping onto the contract. I'm doing this. I just needed you to know that whatever I become in the next 2 years, it's because I chose you. I chose Dad. I chose family. So you better make it worth it, Marcus. You better get your life together and do something that makes this sacrifice mean something. I will. I swear to you, I will. Good. She hung up and called Grace. I'll sign it. 2 days later, Evelyn Carter stood in a courthouse wearing a dress Grace had picked out and holding a bouquet she didn't want, marrying a man she'd met once. There were no guests, no family, just Grace as the witness and a judge who looked bored as he pronounced them husband and wife. Nathaniel didn't kiss her. He shook her hand. Welcome to the contract, Mrs. Drake. Mrs. Drake. The name felt like a costume she was wearing over her real self. That night, she moved into his penthouse in Beacon Hill. Her new home was all glass and steel and cold modern art, so different from the cramped apartment she'd left behind that it felt like another planet. Grace showed her to her bedroom, a space bigger than her old living room, with a bed that looked like it had never been slept in, and a closet full of clothes in her size that she hadn't chosen. Mr. Drake is in meetings until late, Grace said. He's arranged for your brother's debt to be paid tomorrow morning. You'll receive confirmation once the transaction is complete. Your father has been moved to a care facility in Newton, better than where he was, all expenses covered. Your old apartment lease has been terminated and your belongings placed in storage. Do you have any questions? About 1,000, but they all felt too big to ask. No. Then I'll leave you to settle in, Mrs. and Drake. Evelyn sat on the edge of the pristine bed in her pristine room and tried to figure out who she was now. Not the physical therapist from South Boston. Not the desperate woman who'd been drowning. Someone new. Someone bought and paid for. Nathaniel Drake's wife. The thought made her want to laugh or cry or scream. Instead, she just sat there in the silence of her beautiful prison and wondered what the hell she'd done. 2 years. She could survive 2 years of anything, couldn't she? The confirmation came at 9:47 the next morning. Evelyn was standing in the kitchen of the penthouse, her kitchen now, technically, staring at an espresso machine that looked like it required an engineering degree to operate, when her phone buzzed. Transaction complete. M. Carter's obligations settled in full. Grace Montgomery. She read it 3 times before her hands started shaking. $350,000 gone in a single electronic transfer. Her brother was safe. Her father was safe. And all it had cost her was everything. Coffee? Evelyn spun around. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, already dressed in another immaculate suit, looking like he'd been awake for hours. Probably had been. She got the impression this was a man who didn't sleep much, who treated rest like a waste of billable hours. I don't know how to work that thing, she admitted, gesturing at the espresso machine. Grace will show you, or the staff will handle it when they come in. Staff. Housekeeper 3 days a week, chef on call, driver when needed. He said it like he was listing office supplies. You'll get used to it. Evelyn doubted that very much. She'd grown up in a house where doing your own dishes was just what you did, where hiring someone to clean felt like admitting defeat. Now she lived somewhere with staff. I got the confirmation, she said, about Marcus. Good. Then we can move forward. Nathaniel checked his watch. A gesture she was already learning meant the conversation was about to end. I have meetings most of today. Grace will take you shopping for appropriate clothing. There's a charity gala Friday night. Your first public appearance as my wife. She'll brief you on what's expected. What's expected? Evelyn repeated. You mean how to act like I actually want to be married to you? Something cold flickered across his face. I mean how to act like an adult in a professional situation. This isn't a romance, Mrs. Drake. It's a role. Learn your lines. He left before she could respond. Grace arrived an hour later with a car and an agenda. They spent 6 hours at boutiques Evelyn had never heard of, trying on dresses that cost more than her old monthly rent. Grace had opinions about everything. Necklines, hemlines, which designers communicated old money versus new money versus trying too hard. Evelyn stood in front of mirrors, feeling like a doll being dressed by someone with very specific ideas about what dolls should look like. This one, Grace said, holding up a midnight blue gown that probably cost more than Evelyn's car had. For Friday, conservative enough for Nathaniel's business associates, interesting enough that people will remember you. Lucky me. Grace's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she'd heard that tone before. I know this isn't easy, but if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. Half-hearted doesn't work in Nathaniel's world. And what is Nathaniel's world exactly? Besides buying wives? Finance, acquisitions. He takes struggling companies and turns them profitable, usually by cutting everything that doesn't produce immediate value. He's very good at identifying what's essential and eliminating what's not. Grace met her eyes in the mirror. He applies the same logic to his personal life. So I'm what? An asset? A line item on a spreadsheet? You're a solution to a problem. He needs the appearance of stability. You needed money. It's elegant, really, when you think about it. I'm not thinking about it. I'm just trying to survive it. Grace smiled, thin and humorless. Then you're already ahead of where most people would be. Friday came too fast. Evelyn spent the day being transformed by people whose job was apparently to make her look like someone else. Hairstyled in soft waves she'd never be able to recreate herself, makeup applied with the precision of a surgeon. The midnight blue dress that fit like it had been designed specifically for her body. When she finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Perfect, Grace said. Nathaniel will meet you downstairs at 7. He was waiting by the car, checking his phone with the focused intensity of someone who couldn't waste even 30 seconds. When he looked up and saw her, something shifted in his expression, there and gone so fast she might have imagined it. You look appropriate, he said. Thanks. You look like you always do. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Grace briefed you on tonight? Charity gala for some children's hospital. Lots of rich people pretending to care about sick kids. Smile, make small talk, don't embarrass you. Did I miss anything? Your cynicism, leave that at home. They rode to the gala in silence, the city sliding past the car windows in a blur of lights. Evelyn kept her hands folded in her lap to hide the shaking. She'd been to exactly one fancy event in her life, a hospital fundraiser where she'd volunteered to help set up, and she'd spent the whole night in the kitchen. Now she was walking in the front door on the arm of a man everyone would be watching. Relax, Nathaniel said quietly as they approached the entrance. You look like you're headed to an execution. Maybe I am. Drama doesn't suit you. He offered his arm. Stay close. Smile when people talk to you. If anyone asks personal questions, deflect to the charity. If you need to escape, find Grace. Simple. Nothing about this was simple, but Evelyn took his arm anyway, because what choice did she have? The gala was exactly what she'd expected, and somehow worse. A hotel ballroom full of people who wore their wealth like armor, who air-kissed and name-dropped and pretended the champagne they were drinking didn't cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Nathaniel moved through it all like he was born to it, shaking hands and making small talk with the ease of someone who'd spent his whole life in rooms like this. Evelyn smiled until her face hurt. "Nathaniel, didn't expect to see you at something like this." The man who'd appeared at Nathaniel's elbow was shorter, rounder, with the kind of red face that suggested too much good living. He clapped Nathaniel on the shoulder like they were old friends, though Nathaniel's expression suggested otherwise. "Richard, supporting the cause." Of course. And who's this lovely creature? Don't tell me you finally—" "My wife. Evelyn, this is Richard Pemberton. His firm handles corporate restructuring." Wife's. The word still felt foreign in her mouth. Evelyn extended her hand. "Nice to meet you." Richard's handshake was damp, lingering a second too long. "Wife? Well, didn't think I'd see the day. How'd he convince you to take him on? Can't imagine our Nathaniel is much for romance." "He has his moments," Evelyn said, because what else was she supposed to say? "I'm sure he does. Must be quite the whirlwind, though. When did you two—" "Recently." Nathaniel's voice had gone flat, dangerous. "If you'll excuse us, Richard, I see someone I need to speak with." He guided Evelyn away before Richard could respond, his hand firm at the small of her back. "Sorry," he said once they were out of earshot. "Richard's an ass, but he handles significant contracts for several of my acquisitions. Necessary evil." "He seemed surprised you're married." "Most people are. I don't exactly broadcast my personal life. Or have one." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Careful." They made it another hour before Evelyn felt like she might scream. Every conversation was the same. Superficial questions, careful assessments, people trying to figure out who she was and why Nathaniel Drake had married her. She deflected, smiled, played the role Grace had coached her on, but underneath she felt like a fraud waiting to be exposed. "I need air," she told Nathaniel during a lull. He glanced at her, something almost like concern crossing his face. "Balcony. Through those doors. 5 minutes. Then we need to make an appearance at the auction." The balcony was empty, cold, blissfully quiet. Evelyn leaned against the railing and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Below, the city spread out in all directions, millions of people living their normal lives while she played dress-up in a marriage that wasn't real. First one's always the hardest. Evelyn turned to find a woman about her age standing in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of champagne. She was stunning in a way that looked effortless. Dark skin, elegant features, a red dress that probably cost more than Evelyn's entire wardrobe. "Sorry?" "First gala as Nathaniel Drake's wife. I'm Simone Laurent. My husband does business with Nathaniel." She offered one of the champagne flutes. "You look like you need this more than I do." Evelyn took it because refusing felt rude. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who remembers what it was like. "I married into this world too. Took me months to stop feeling like an imposter." Simone leaned against the railing beside her. "For what it's worth, you're doing fine. Better than fine. Half the women in there are trying to figure out how you landed Nathaniel Drake. Lucky, I guess." "Luck had nothing to do with it. Nathaniel doesn't do anything without a reason. If he married you, it's because you're exactly what he needed." Simone sipped her champagne. "Question is whether he's what you needed." Evelyn didn't know how to answer that. Simone seemed to understand. "Word of advice? Don't try to change him. Men like Nathaniel, they are who they are. You either accept it or you drown trying to fix them." She set down her empty glass. "I should get back, but if you ever need someone who understands what this life is like, you have my number. Grace has it." She disappeared back inside, leaving Evelyn alone with questions she didn't want to answer. The rest of the night blurred together. The auction, Nathaniel bidding absurd amounts on items he didn't want for a cause he didn't care about because that's what people like him did. More conversations, more careful smiles, more pretending. By the time they finally left, Evelyn's feet were screaming from heels she wasn't used to, and her face hurt from maintaining the perfect expression. In the car, Nathaniel loosened his tie and closed his eyes. "You did well," he said. I smiled and nodded. Not exactly difficult. "You'd be surprised. I've seen people crack under less pressure." He opened his eyes, studying her in the dim light. Richard will spread word that I'm married. By Monday, everyone in my professional circle will know. That's the point of tonight, making it real in their eyes. And making it real in yours? It is real. We signed a contract. That's not what I meant. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. I don't deal in things that aren't quantifiable, Mrs. Drake. Feelings, emotions, connection. Those are variables I can't control. The contract is real because it's defined. Everything else is just noise. Evelyn looked out the window at the passing city. Must be lonely. Loneliness is also just noise. Back at the penthouse, they separated to their respective bedrooms without another word. Evelyn peeled off the expensive dress, washed away the expensive makeup, and stood under a shower hot enough to hurt. When she finally crawled into the massive bed, she didn't feel like Mrs. Drake. She just felt like Evelyn Carter, drowning in a life that fit all wrong. The days developed a rhythm. Nathaniel left early for work, came home late, and spent whatever hours remained in his study behind a closed door. Evelyn filled her time trying to figure out what wives of billionaires did all day. She visited her father at the care facility, a place so much nicer than where he'd been that it made her want to cry. She had coffee with Simone, who seemed to understand without being told that this marriage wasn't what it looked like. She attended 3 more events with Nathaniel, each one slightly less terrifying than the last, and she tried not to think about the fact that she had 1 year, 11 months, and 3 weeks left. 3 weeks into the marriage, Nathaniel came home from work looking like someone had punched him. Not physically, he was too controlled for that to show, but something in his eyes was different, harder. Bad day? Evelyn asked from the couch where she'd been reading. Gerald Hutchinson is questioning the legitimacy of our marriage. Evelyn set down her book. Who? Board member of a company I'm acquiring. Conservative, old money, family values type. He's been asking questions. When we met, why the quick wedding, whether this is some kind of tax arrangement. Nathaniel poured himself a drink, something he rarely did. He has enough influence to tank the acquisition if he convinces the other board members I'm not the stable family man they think I am. So what do? We make it more convincing. He downed half the drink. I'm taking you away for 2 weeks. Somewhere isolated, romantic. A honeymoon we should have had. Grace is arranging it now. A honeymoon. A performance. Somewhere Gerald's private investigator can't follow easily. Somewhere that looks legitimate. We'll be photographed leaving, photographed arriving, and when we come back, we'll look like 2 people who actually spent 2 weeks falling in love. He finished the drink. Pack for warm weather. We leave Monday. Where are we going? Private island in the Caribbean. I own it. No one else there but us and minimal staff. He set down the glass. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I signed up for playing your wife. Guess this is part of the job description. Something flickered in his expression. I suppose it is. Monday morning, they boarded a private plane. Evelyn had never been on a private plane before. Had never been out of the country before, if she was being honest. Now she sat in a leather seat that probably cost more than her college education, watching Nathaniel work on his laptop like they were just commuting to an office and not flying to a private island for a fake honeymoon. The island was small, lush, surrounded by water so blue it looked artificial. A single house sat on the highest point, modern architecture that somehow blended into the tropical landscape, all glass and white stone and infinity pools. It was the kind of place Evelyn had seen in magazines and assumed was photoshopped. This is yours? She asked as they walked up from the dock. I needed somewhere I could disappear when necessary. Bought it 4 years ago. He glanced at her. You'll have your own wing. Privacy is maintained even here. Of course it was. Because heaven forbid they actually have to spend time together. The staff, a housekeeper named Maria, and her husband Carlos, who maintained the property, greeted them with warm smiles and showed Evelyn to her room. It was beautiful. Everything was beautiful. The view, the furniture, the way the ocean breeze moved through the open windows. It should have felt like paradise. Instead, it felt like a very expensive cage. That night, they ate dinner on the terrace, the ocean stretching out dark and infinite before them. Maria had prepared something elaborate with fish and tropical fruit, and it tasted like nothing because Evelyn couldn't stop thinking about how absurd this all was. Fake honeymoon on a private island with a man who looked at her like she was a quarterly report that needed reviewing. You're quiet, Nathaniel said. Just thinking. About? About how we're sitting in paradise pretending to be in love so some board member will approve your acquisition. About how this is my life now. About how I don't even know you beyond the fact that you like your coffee black, and you work 16-hour days, and you bought a wife because it was more efficient than dating. Nathaniel set down his fork. What do you want to know? I don't know. Normal things? Where you grew up? If you have family? What you wanted to be when you were a kid before you decided to become a robot in an expensive suit. His jaw tightened. I'm not a robot. Could have fooled me. I'm practical. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, practical looks a lot like emotionally dead. She expected him to shut down, to retreat behind that wall of cold professionalism he wore like armor. Instead, he surprised her. I grew up in Connecticut. My father ran a hedge fund. My mother played tennis and chaired charity boards. I have no siblings. I was expected to be excellent at everything, so I was. Harvard undergrad, Wharton MBA, first job at Goldman Sachs at 23. I made my first million at 26, my first 100 million at 30. Everything I did was calculated to produce maximum returns. He met her eyes. Including marrying you. That's not an answer. That's a resume. It's the only answer I have. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Evelyn studied him across the table. In the warm island light, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. It disappeared as soon as she noticed it. What about you? He asked. Who's Evelyn Carter when she's not playing Mrs. Drake? I don't know anymore. I used to be a physical therapist who actually liked her job. Someone who had friends and a life and a tiny apartment that was mine. Now I'm... She gestured at the island, the house, the life she'd stepped into. This, whatever this is, you're someone who saved her family. That's not nothing. It's not enough either. They sat in silence, the ocean providing the only sound. After a while, Nathaniel stood. I have work to do. Early call with Tokyo. You should get some rest. He left her there on the terrace, and Evelyn wondered if this was what the next 2 years would look like. Two people existing in parallel, never quite connecting, just playing roles until the contract expired. She finished her wine and went to bed. The thing about paradise was that it got boring fast when you were stuck there with nothing to do and no one to talk to. By day 3, Evelyn had explored every inch of the house, walked the beach until she'd memorized every shell, and read 2 books she'd found in the library. Nathaniel spent his days exactly like he spent them in Boston, locked in the study on video calls, emerging only for meals that were polite and empty. On the 4th morning, Evelyn woke up angry. She found him on the terrace with his laptop and his coffee, already dressed in linen pants and a white shirt like he was ready for a photo shoot about tropical businessmen. The sun was barely up. This is stupid, she said without preamble. He looked up, one eyebrow raised. Good morning to you too. We've been here 4 days and you've spent maybe 3 hours total in the same room with me. How is this supposed to convince anyone we're actually married? We're here. That's what matters. Gerald's investigator tracked us to the airport, saw us board the plane together. The optics are handled. The optics? Evelyn laughed, sharp and humorless. You realize actual married people spend time together, right? They talk. They do things. They don't just exist in the same zip code and call it a relationship. This isn't a relationship. It's a contract, I know. You've mentioned it about 50 times. But if you want people to believe this is real, you're going to have to do better than just showing up for meals and then disappearing. She crossed her arms. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to close that laptop. You're going to spend today acting like a human being on a honeymoon with his wife. And you're going to do it without checking your phone every 5 minutes or making excuses about Tokyo calls. Nathaniel stared at her like she'd just suggested he set himself on fire. I have work. The work will still be there tomorrow. But if you want this performance to be believable, you need to actually perform. She softened her voice slightly. Look, I don't like this any more than you do, but we're stuck here for 10 more days. We can either keep pretending the other person doesn't exist, or we can figure out how to at least be civil enough to fake a honeymoon. Your choice. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, He closed the laptop. What did you have in mind? Evelyn blinked. She hadn't actually expected him to agree. I don't know. What do normal people do on honeymoons? I wouldn't know. I've never been on one. Neither have I, genius. That's kind of the problem. She thought about it. The beach? We're on an island, and I haven't seen you go near the water once. I don't swim. You don't swim or you won't swim? Both. Well, today you're going to sit on the beach and pretend to enjoy it like a normal person who paid for a tropical vacation. She turned toward her room. Put on a swimsuit. Meet me down there in 20 minutes. And Nathaniel, leave the phone. He checked some. She didn't wait to see if he'd actually do it. If he didn't show up, fine. She'd spend the day alone like she'd been doing anyway. But at least she'd tried. 23 minutes later, Nathaniel appeared on the beach wearing swim trunks and looking deeply uncomfortable. Evelyn was already in the water, up to her knees, wearing a bikini that had come with all the other clothes Grace had picked out. She'd never owned a bikini before, had always been too self-conscious about her body, too practical to spend money on something she'd wear once. But here, with no one around but a man who looked at her like a business arrangement, she figured, what the hell? You came, she said. You gave an order, I'm following it. But there was something almost amused in his expression. This is ridiculous. Completely. Get in the water. I said I don't swim. You don't have to swim. Just stand here. Feel the ocean. Pretend to be a human being experiencing a nice thing. She splashed water at him. Come on, it won't kill you. He looked at the water like it might, in fact, kill him. But after a long moment, he waded in, stopping beside her. The water came up to mid-thigh on him, and he stood there with his arms crossed, looking like a man enduring a punishment. Now what? He asked. Now you relax. Stop looking like you're about to be executed. I don't relax. I've noticed. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it serves some strategic purpose? Nathaniel was quiet, thinking. I don't remember. That's sad. That's honest. He looked out at the horizon, something shifting in his expression. My father used to say time spent on anything that doesn't produce measurable returns is time wasted. Hobbies, vacations, relationships, all just distractions from building something meaningful. And you believed him? I became him. The words came out flat, factual. Everything I do has a purpose. Everything I own serves a function. Even this island, I bought it as a tax write-off and a place to host clients, not because I wanted somewhere to relax. Evelyn studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the way he held himself like he was still in a boardroom. What happened to you? Nothing happened to me. I was raised to be excellent, so I became excellent, that's all. That's not all. Excellent people can still be human. You're like someone built a person-shaped thing and forgot to install the part that actually feels anything. His head snapped toward her. You don't know anything about what I feel. Because you don't show it, ever. You walk around like you're above everything, above emotion, above connection, above basic human need. It's exhausting just watching you. Then don't watch. Kind of hard when we're supposed to be convincing people we're in love. Nathaniel moved closer, something dangerous in his expression. You want me to feel something? Fine. I feel trapped. I feel like I'm in a cage I built myself and I don't know how to get out. I feel like every decision I've made has led me to a place where I have everything I'm supposed to want and nothing I actually need. I feel like I'm 35 years old, and I don't know who I am beyond the work I do and the money I make. Is that human enough for you? The words hung between them, raw and unexpected. Evelyn had wanted to crack his armor, but she hadn't expected it to shatter quite so completely. Yeah, she said softly, that's pretty human. They stood there in the water, the morning sun climbing higher, and for the first time since she'd met him, Nathaniel looked like an actual person instead of a walking business transaction. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. The being married part, even the fake version, I don't know how to be around someone for more than professional interactions. Then we'll figure it out together, because I don't know how to be married to a billionaire who bought me like I was furniture. So we're both drowning here. She held out her hand. Truce? For the next 10 days, we try to actually be two people on a honeymoon, instead of two strangers pretending the other one doesn't exist." He looked at her hand like it was a bomb. Then, slowly, he took it. Truce. The days shifted after that. Nathaniel still worked, but he limited it to mornings and late evenings. The afternoons became theirs, swimming in the ocean despite his initial resistance, exploring the island's trails, lying on the beach reading while the sun burned overhead. They talked, really talked, about things that had nothing to do with contracts or acquisitions. She told him about growing up with a single father who worked himself to death trying to provide, about her mother who had died when Evelyn was 8 and left a hole no one knew how to fill, about wanting to help people, which was why she'd become a physical therapist, and how satisfying it was to watch someone regain movement they thought they'd lost forever. He told her about a childhood that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like suffocation from within. Private schools where academic performance was the only currency that mattered. A father who measured his son's worth in accomplishments and found him perpetually wanting. A mother who loved him, but couldn't protect him from expectations that crushed anything soft or vulnerable. "I made my first million and thought he'd finally be proud," Nathaniel said one afternoon. They were sitting on the beach, late sun turning everything gold. Instead, he asked why it wasn't 10 million. "So I made 10 million. Then he asked about 100 million. It was never enough. He died 3 years ago, and I still catch myself thinking about what he'd say about my latest acquisition." That's horrible. That's reality. He made me who I am. No, he made you afraid. There's a difference. Evelyn drew patterns in the sand with her finger. You're so busy trying to prove something to a dead man that you forgot to figure out what you actually want. I want to be successful. You already are successful. You have more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. So what now? You just keep making more, keep acquiring more? At what point is it enough? Nathaniel didn't answer. Maybe because he didn't have one. On day 7, a storm rolled in. Not a hurricane, but something close. Wind that rattled the windows and rain that came down in sheets. The power went out around midnight. Evelyn was lying in bed listening to the storm when she heard the crash. She found Nathaniel in the kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and spilled coffee, looking rattled in a way she'd never seen him. "What happened?" "Nothing. I'm fine. Just clumsy." But his hands were shaking. "Nathaniel, I said I'm fine." She walked across the glass in her bare feet, ignoring his protest, and took his hands in hers. They were ice cold despite the tropical heat. "When's the last time you slept? Actually slept? Not just lay in bed working on your phone?" "I don't know. A few days." "A few days? You're running on fumes and your hands are shaking and you're telling me you're fine? I don't sleep well, haven't for years. It's not a big deal." "It's a huge deal. You're going to burn out." "I don't burn out. I just keep going." Evelyn pulled him toward the living room, away from the glass, made him sit on the couch. The storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the room in brief, stark flashes. "What are you afraid of?" she asked. "I'm not—" "Yes, you are. You work yourself to death. You don't sleep. You won't let yourself feel anything or need anyone. That's not ambition. That's fear. So what are you afraid of?" For a long moment he didn't answer. Then so quietly she almost didn't hear it over the storm. "Stopping. If I stop, if I slow down, I'll have to look at what my life actually is. And I don't think I can handle that." The admission cracked something open between them. Evelyn moved closer until their knees were touching. "Your life is what you make it, not what your father wanted, not what some board member thinks you should be. What you actually want." "I don't know what I want." "Then maybe it's time to figure it out." Lightning flashed again, and in that brief moment of light, she saw his expression clearly, lost, vulnerable, almost desperate. Then the darkness returned and he was moving, closing the space between them, his mouth finding hers with an urgency that shocked them both. Evelyn should have pulled away, should have reminded him this was fake, a contract, not real. But his hands were in her hair, and he was kissing her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning, and she realized she'd been wanting this for days without admitting it to herself. She kissed him back. It was messy, desperate, nothing like the controlled precision she'd expected from him. His hands shook as they moved across her skin. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons of his shirt. They broke apart long enough to breathe, foreheads pressed together. "This isn't part of the contract," she whispered. "I know. This is a bad idea." "I know that too. We should stop. We should." But neither of them moved. The storm raged outside as they tumbled onto the couch. As clothes disappeared and boundaries dissolved, as two people who'd been pretending to be married stopped pretending and just let themselves feel something real. It was clumsy, human, punctuated by nervous laughter when elbows collided and whispered questions about what the other wanted. Not the polished, controlled encounter Evelyn might have expected from someone like Nathaniel. Just two broken people reaching for each other in the dark. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the rain. Nathaniel's fingers traced absent patterns on her shoulder. "That was... yeah," Evelyn agreed. "We probably shouldn't have... definitely not. But I'm not sorry." She turned to look at him. In the dim light from the storm, he looked younger, less guarded. "Me neither." They fell asleep there on the couch, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in what was probably years, Nathaniel slept through the night. The morning brought clarity and complications. Evelyn woke up first, Nathaniel's arm heavy across her waist, and had about 30 seconds of contentment before the panic set in. They'd crossed a line, a big, uncrossable line. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, and they'd just made it personal in the most physical way possible. She tried to slip away without waking him, but his arm tightened. "Don't," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Don't run." "I'm not running. I'm just panicking. I can feel it." He opened his eyes. "We're both adults. We made a choice. We don't have to make it complicated. It's already complicated. We're fake married, and we just had very real sex. How is that not complicated?" "Because we decide it's not. We can acknowledge what happened without letting it derail everything." He sat up, and she tried not to notice the way the morning light hit his bare chest. "Unless you regret it." "Do you?" "I asked first." Evelyn thought about it. About how he'd kissed her like she mattered. About how vulnerable he'd been. About how right it had felt despite being completely wrong. "No," she admitted. "I don't regret it. But I don't know what it means. It means we're human. It means we're stuck on an island together, and we gave in to something that's been building for days. It doesn't have to mean more than that unless we want it to. And do you? Want it to mean more?" Nathaniel was quiet, and she watched him wrestle with honesty. "I don't know. I'm not good at this. At feelings and relationships and figuring out what I want versus what I think I should want. But I know that being with you last night felt more real than anything I've done in years, so maybe we don't define it right now. Maybe we just see what happens." It was the most uncertain she'd ever heard him sound, and somehow that made it easier. "Okay, we see what happens." The remaining days on the island developed a rhythm that felt dangerous in its ease. They still had their separate rooms, but Nathaniel spent most nights in hers, and she was surprised to discover he was funny when he let his guard down. Dry, dark humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh when she least expected it. He taught her to play chess, and she beat him on her third try, which seemed to delight and frustrate him in equal measure. They cooked together, badly, since neither of them really knew how, and ended up eating burnt fish while laughing at their own incompetence. And they talked. Endless conversations about everything and nothing. His dreams of maybe doing something that mattered beyond just making money. Her fear that she'd never figure out who she was beyond being the person who saved her family. The ways they were both trapped in lives they'd chosen but weren't sure they wanted. "What would you do?" she asked one night. They were in bed, her head on his chest, his fingers playing with her hair. "If you could do anything, if money wasn't a factor, and you didn't have to prove anything to anyone." He was quiet for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. "I'd want to build something that actually helped people, not just make rich people richer through acquisitions. Maybe take struggling businesses in underserved communities and actually invest in making them sustainable. Create jobs that matter. Leave something behind that's more than just money in a bank account." "That's beautiful." That's naive. The business world doesn't work that way. So make it work that way. You have enough money to do whatever you want. Why keep playing by rules you don't believe in? Because I don't know how to do anything else. Evelyn propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. Then learn. You're the smartest person I've ever met. If you can figure out corporate acquisitions, you can figure out how to do something meaningful. You have more faith in me than I do. Someone should. He pulled her down for a kiss that started gentle and turned into something more. They made love slowly this time, no desperate urgency, just two people learning each other's rhythms. Afterward, Nathaniel held her like she might disappear. I don't want to go back, he admitted. To Boston, to the real world, to pretending this is just a contract. Then don't pretend. But what is it if it's not a contract? What are we? Evelyn didn't have an answer, because they were still fake married, still bound by a legal document that said they'd divorce in 2 years, still living a life built on a transaction. The fact that real feelings had developed didn't change the foundation. I don't know, she said honestly, but we'll figure it out. The day before they were supposed to leave, Nathaniel got a call that changed everything. Evelyn knew it was bad from the way his expression shuddered, from the way he stepped away from her to take it. When he came back, he looked like someone had physically struck him. What happened? The acquisition Gerald was blocking? Someone leaked information about my personal life to the board. Photos from before we were married, financial records, questions about the legitimacy of our relationship. His voice was flat, controlled, but she could hear the rage underneath. They're calling an emergency vote tomorrow to remove me from the deal entirely. Can they do that? If they have enough evidence that I misrepresented my situation, yes. And someone's been feeding them everything they need. He was already moving, pulling out his phone. We need to leave tonight. I have to get back to Boston and do damage control. Nathaniel, not now. I need to think. He disappeared to make calls, and Evelyn sat alone on the terrace watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that felt like goodbye. They'd had 10 days of something real, something that might have become more. And now the world was crashing back in, reminding them that fairy tales didn't exist and paradise was just a temporary escape from reality. Maria helped her pack, quiet sympathy in her eyes. Carlos arranged the boat back to the mainland, the private plane back to Boston. By midnight, they were in the air, Nathaniel buried in his laptop, building whatever strategy he thought would save his deal. Evelyn sat across from him, watching him disappear back into the cold, controlled version of himself she'd met 2 months ago. Talk to me, she said finally. I'm working. You're shutting down. There's a difference. What do you want me to say? That I'm furious someone violated my privacy? That I'm angry at myself for thinking I could actually have something real? That the last 10 days felt like a dream, and now I'm waking up to the nightmare my life actually is? He slammed the laptop shut. Will that make you feel better? It would make me feel like you're still the person I was with on the island, not this robot who thinks he can control everything. The person you were with on the island was a fantasy. This is who I actually am. No, this is who you're afraid to stop being. There's a difference. They stared at each other across the small space of the plane, and Evelyn saw the exact moment he made his choice, saw him pull back, rebuild the walls, retreat to the safety of emotional distance. When we land, we go back to the contract. Clean separation, professional arrangement, no more confusion about what this is. I'll handle the situation with Gerald. You'll attend whatever events are required. At the end of 2 years, we divorce as planned. That's it. Each word landed like a physical blow. You're serious. I'm realistic. We let ourselves get caught up in playing house, and look where it got us. Someone's using our relationship against me. The only way to fix this is to make it clear there's nothing real to exploit. Except there is something real. We both know it. What we know doesn't matter. What we can prove does. And right now, all anyone can prove is that I paid off your brother's debt right before we got married, which looks exactly like what it is, a transaction. He opened the laptop again. I'm sorry if you thought it was more, but I told you from the beginning what this was. Evelyn felt something break inside her chest. You're a coward. I'm practical. No, you're terrified. Terrified of actually feeling something. Terrified of being vulnerable. terrified of wanting something you can't control. So you're going to throw away something real because it scares you more than losing a business deal. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm acknowledging reality. Reality is that we spent 10 days falling for each other and now you're too afraid to admit it. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Believe whatever helps you sleep at night. But when we land, this conversation is over. They didn't speak for the rest of the flight. Evelyn stared out the window at the darkness below, watching the lights of cities pass like dying stars, and tried to figure out how she'd let herself fall for someone who'd been clear from the start that he was unavailable. She'd known this was the contract. She'd known he was emotionally closed off. She'd known, and she'd let herself hope anyway. The mistake was hers. Boston greeted them with freezing rain and gray skies that matched Evelyn's mood perfectly. The car from the airport was silent except for Nathaniel's phone calls, rapid-fire conversations with lawyers and board members, and people whose entire job seemed to be managing crises. She watched the city blur past the windows and tried to remember what her life had been like 3 months ago, before contracts and private islands and falling for someone who'd made it clear from the start that falling wasn't part of the deal. They pulled up to the penthouse and Nathaniel was out of the car before it fully stopped, phone already to his ear, briefcase in hand. He paused at the entrance, turned back. I'll be at the office most of the week. Grace will contact you about the foundation gala on Saturday. We need to be seen together, united front. He said it like he was scheduling a dental appointment. And Evelyn? What happened on the island stays there. We're clear on that? She wanted to throw something at him. Wanted to scream that you couldn't just turn feelings off like a faucet. Instead, she just nodded. Crystal. He left without another word. Evelyn stood in the gleaming lobby of a building she still didn't think of as home and felt the last 2 weeks crack apart like ice under pressure. Maria from the island had known their names, had smiled at them like they were a real couple. Carlos had left fresh flowers in their rooms every morning like he believed in their happiness. And she'd let herself believe it too, for a while. Let herself think that maybe Nathaniel Drake could be more than a man who measured everything in returns on investment. The mistake was thinking paradise could survive outside its borders. She took the elevator up to the penthouse, walked through rooms that suddenly felt more like a museum than a home, and found herself standing in front of Nathaniel's study. The door was open. His space? The one place in the apartment that actually looked lived in, with papers scattered across the desk and books stacked in piles that probably had some organizational system only he understood. There was a photo on his desk she hadn't noticed before. Young Nathaniel, maybe 16, in a rowing uniform, holding a trophy. His father stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, not smiling. Just looking at the camera like the photographer had interrupted something important. The kid in the photo looked exhausted. Evelyn picked it up, studied it, tried to find the man she'd slept with in that tired teenager's face. The man who'd admitted he didn't know what he wanted beyond the approval of someone who would never give it. She put the photo back exactly where she'd found it and went to her own room. Separate bedrooms, professional arrangement, no more confusion about what this was. The week crawled past like something wounded. Nathaniel left early, came home late, slept in his own room. The few times they crossed paths, he was polite, distant. Every interaction choreographed to maintain maximum emotional distance. He asked about her father, who was doing well at the care facility, had even started physical therapy. He asked about Marcus, who'd found a job at a warehouse and was staying clean. He asked these things like a stranger making small talk at a bus stop. On Thursday, Evelyn had lunch with Simone, who took one look at her and ordered wine. What happened? Nothing happened. That's the worst lie I've heard all week. And I've been at charity meetings with people pretending to care about causes they can't even pronounce. Simone leaned forward. You went on a honeymoon and came back looking like someone died. So either Nathaniel was even worse company than expected, or something happened that you're not talking about. Evelyn stared at her wine glass. If you fell for someone you weren't supposed to fall for, what would you do? Is this a hypothetical? Not even a little bit. Simone sat back, understanding crossing her face. Oh, honey, you fell for him. Temporarily lost my mind is more accurate. And let me guess, he freaked out and ran back behind his emotional walls? How did you... Because that's what men like Nathaniel do. They're so terrified of actually feeling something that the second it gets real, they retreat to what they know, which is usually work and control and pretending they're above basic human need. Simone sipped her wine. My husband did the same thing when we first got together. Took him 6 months to admit he loved me and another 3 to stop panicking about it. This is different. We have a contract, an end date. This was never supposed to be real. And yet it is. You think a piece of paper stops feelings from happening? You think you can spend time with someone, sleep with someone, let yourself be vulnerable with someone, and not develop feelings just because there's an expiration date? Simone shook her head. You're human. So is he, even though he works very hard to pretend otherwise. He made it clear we're going back to the original arrangement. Professional distance. No more complications. And you're just going to accept that? What choice do I have? I can't force him to feel something he doesn't feel. Can't you? Or are you just as scared as he is? Simone's voice was gentle but firm. You could fight for this. Tell him you want more than a contract. Make him choose between his fear and something real. But that would require risk, and risk is terrifying when you've already lost so much. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to say she wasn't scared, she was just being practical, but the words stuck in her throat because Simone was right. She was terrified. Terrified of pushing Nathaniel and having him confirm that the island was just a fantasy. Terrified of wanting more and being told she was only ever supposed to want what the contract provided. Terrified of being rejected by someone she'd started to love. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. No one does. That's the whole point of relationships. You figure it out together. But first, someone has to be brave enough to say they want to try. The Foundation Gala on Saturday was held at the Museum of Fine Arts. Hundreds of Boston's elite gathered to throw money at problems they'd never have to actually solve. Evelyn wore a gold dress that cost more than her first car and smiled until her face went numb. Nathaniel played his part perfectly. Attentive husband, hand at the small of her back, introducing her to people whose names she immediately forgot. To anyone watching, they looked like exactly what they were supposed to be. But Evelyn could feel the distance between them like a physical thing, could see the careful way he avoided actually looking at her, could feel the way his hand on her back was positioned for show, not comfort. You're doing well, he said during a lull, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. Very convincing. So are you, almost like you've had practice pretending to care about people. His jaw tightened. Evelyn? Mr. Drake. A man appeared at Nathaniel's elbow, older, distinguished, with the kind of face that probably smiled the same way, whether he was greeting you or firing you. Didn't expect to see you here after all the excitement this week. Nathaniel's expression went carefully neutral. Gerald, I didn't realize you'd be attending. So this was Gerald Hutchinson, the man whose investigation had blown up their island paradise. Evelyn studied him with new eyes. Wouldn't miss it, and this must be the mysterious Mrs. Drake. Gerald's smile didn't reach his eyes. Quite the whirlwind romance from what I understand. How did you two meet? Through mutual friends, Evelyn said smoothly. Grace had prepped her for this exact question. It was one of those things where you just know. How charming, though I have to say the timing was quite convenient. Your brother's debt settled right before the wedding, your father moved to an expensive care facility, almost like a business transaction. The room went cold. Nathaniel's hand tightened on her back. Careful, Gerald. I'm simply making observations. No judgment, of course, though I do wonder what the other board members will think when they hear about... When they hear about what? Evelyn cut him off, her voice sharp. That my husband helped my family when they needed it? That he's the kind of man who steps up when people he cares about are in trouble? I'm sorry if that doesn't fit your narrative about transactions and convenience, but some of us still believe in actually helping people instead of just writing checks at galas and calling it charity. Gerald's smile faltered. My wife is passionate about family, Nathaniel said, and there was something almost warm in his voice. It's one of the things I love about her. Love. The word hung in the air between them, and Evelyn didn't know if he meant it or if it was just part of the performance, but Gerald was watching them with narrowed eyes, reassessing. Well, congratulations on your marriage. I'm sure it will last as long as it needs to. He walked away. and Evelyn felt Nathaniel's entire body tense. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "We just got here. Now, Evelyn." Something in his tone made her follow without argument. They made it to the car before he exploded. "What the hell were you thinking? You don't engage with people like Gerald. You smile and deflect and let me handle it." "Handle it how?" "By standing there while he basically called our marriage a fraud?" "Yes, because getting defensive just confirms his suspicions." Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. "He was baiting you, and you took it. I was defending us." "There is no us to defend. That's the whole point. It's a contract. It's business. And you just made it personal in front of the one person who's trying to destroy me." "Maybe it is personal. Maybe I'm tired of pretending it's not." "Well, get over it, because personal is what loses me everything I've worked for. Personal is what gives people like Gerald ammunition. Personal is what I specifically paid you not to be." The words hit like a slap. Evelyn stared at him, this man she'd started to fall for on a tropical island that felt like another lifetime ago. "Is that what I am to you? Someone you paid?" "That's what the contract says." "Screw the contract. I'm asking what I am to you. As a person. As someone you spent 2 weeks with. As someone you slept with and talked to and held like they mattered. What am I?" Nathaniel's expression was carved from ice. "You're my wife for 1 year, 9 months, and 2 weeks. After that, you're $1 million richer and free to live whatever life you want. That's it." "You're lying." "I'm being honest for the first time since we got back. The island was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. I let my guard down and it compromised everything. So we go back to the original plan. Professional distance, scheduled appearances. A clean divorce when the time comes." "And what we felt? What happened between us?" "Doesn't matter. Feelings don't change contracts." Evelyn laughed, bitter and sharp. "You really believe that? You really think you can just decide not to feel something and make it true?" "I've been doing it my entire life." "Then you're more broken than I thought." She saw him flinch, just barely, but he recovered fast. "Maybe I am, but at least I'm honest about what I can offer. You're the one who decided to want more." The car pulled up to the penthouse. Evelyn got out without waiting for him, took the elevator up alone, and locked herself in her room. She heard him come in an hour later, heard him pacing in his study, heard the clink of glass that meant he was drinking. Good. Let him drink himself into oblivion while he tried to convince himself he didn't feel anything. She cried herself to sleep and hated herself for it. Sunday morning, Evelyn woke up to shouting. She stumbled out of her room to find Nathaniel in the living room with 3 men she didn't recognize. One of them had blood on his shirt. Nathaniel himself looked like he'd been in a fight. Split lip, bruise forming on his jaw, shirt torn. "What the hell is going on?" Nathaniel spun toward her. "Get back in your room." "Not until you tell me why there are bleeding strangers in our living room." "Business. Nothing you need to worry about." "Bullshit. You're hurt and there's blood on the floor and you're telling me not to worry?" One of the men stepped forward. "Mrs. Drake, your husband got involved in something he shouldn't have. There are people who aren't happy about it. We're just here to deliver a message." "What message?" "That certain business arrangements need to stay in place. That attempting to restructure deals that have been profitable for a long time is bad for everyone. And that family makes excellent leverage when someone needs to be reminded of their priorities." Ice flooded Evelyn's veins. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality. Nathaniel knows how this works." "Don't you, Nathaniel?" Nathaniel's face was white with rage. "Get out of my house!" "We're leaving. Just remember what we discussed. You have 48 hours to reconsider your position on the Hutchinson acquisition. After that, we start making phone calls to people who might be interested in your wife's schedule. Where she goes, who she sees, how easy it would be to—" "I said get out." The men left and Evelyn stood frozen in the middle of the living room, trying to process what had just happened. Nathaniel slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" she asked. "No." "Nathaniel, I said no." He looked up, and she'd never seen him this rattled. "This is exactly why I keep you separate from my work, why I don't let you in. Because the second you're involved, you become a target." I'm already involved. I'm your wife, fake or not. Those men knew my name. They know my schedule. So either tell me what's going on, or I walk out that door and you can explain to Gerald why your marriage fell apart. He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he started talking. The Hutchinson acquisition wasn't just a simple corporate takeover. It involved a pharmaceutical company that had been engaging in price manipulation, deliberately keeping life-saving drugs expensive to maximize profits. Nathaniel had discovered it during due diligence and planned to restructure the company, cut the corruption, make the drugs accessible. It would save lives. It would also cost certain people a lot of money. Gerald Hutchinson was one of those people. His family had controlled the company for 3 generations, had built their fortune on making sure medication stayed expensive. Nathaniel threatening to change that was threatening their entire empire. So you're trying to do something good, and they're trying to stop you by threatening me, Evelyn said flatly. Yes, which is why I need you to stay out of it. Let me handle this. By giving in? By letting them keep manipulating drug prices because they threatened your fake wife? By keeping you safe. That's all that matters. Since when? 24 hours ago, you told me I was just a line item on a contract. Now suddenly my safety matters? It's always mattered. The words came out raw, frustrated. You think I don't care? You think I can just turn it off? I can't. I've tried. Since we got back, I've tried to go back to seeing this as just business, and I can't. Because somewhere between signing that contract and watching you fall asleep on a beach, you became something I can't categorize, something I don't know how to handle, and that terrifies me. Evelyn's heart was hammering. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to care about someone and keep them safe. I don't know how to want something and not destroy it. So I push you away because that's easier than admitting I'm completely out of my depth. You're an idiot. He laughed, sharp and humorless. I'm aware. I mean, you're an idiot if you think pushing me away keeps me safe. I'm already a target. The only difference is whether I'm a target who stands with you or a target who's alone and confused about why her husband won't talk to her. If something happened to you because of me, then we deal with it together. That's what people who actually care about each other do. They don't hide things and push each other away to some misguided idea of protection. They trust each other enough to face the danger together. Nathaniel stood, crossed to her, stopped close enough that she could see the split in his lip, the bruise forming on his jaw. I don't know how to trust like that. Then learn. Because I'm not going anywhere, contract or no contract. You're stuck with me. For 1 year and 9 months. Or longer, if you want. The words hung between them, an offer and a question, and a terrifying leap all at once. Nathaniel's hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I want, he said quietly. I just don't know if I know how. Then we figure it out, together. He kissed her, gentle despite the split lip, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. This wasn't paradise. This was real life, with blood on the floor and threats from dangerous men, and a husband who was still learning how to be vulnerable. But it was real. And real was worth fighting for. They pulled apart, and Evelyn noticed the blood on his shirt again. We need to get you cleaned up, and then you're going to tell me everything about this Hutchinson situation so we can figure out how to handle it. We? You said it yourself. I'm already a target. Might as well make it worth it. For the first time since they'd gotten back from the island, Nathaniel smiled. You're terrifying. You're just now figuring that out? She cleaned his split lip in the bathroom while he filled her in on the details. The pharmaceutical company, the price manipulation, the network of people profiting from keeping medication expensive. The plan he'd had to restructure it all, make the drugs affordable, use his acquisition to actually do something good for once instead of just making money. So do it, Evelyn said, dabbing antiseptic on the cut and ignoring his wince. Don't let them bully you into backing down. It's not that simple. They threatened you. And I'm telling you, I can handle it. Hire security if you're worried, but don't give up on doing something that could save lives just because some entitled jerks don't want to lose their profit margin. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, but it's right. And I didn't marry someone who makes easy choices. I married someone who's supposed to be building something meaningful, remember? This is your chance. Nathaniel caught her hand, brought it to his lips. How did I get this lucky? You paid $350,000 and promised me $1 million more. That's how. He laughed and it sounded genuine. Best investment I ever made. Damn right it was. They spent the rest of the day strategizing. Nathaniel called his lawyers, started building a case against Gerald and his associates, called the SEC, the FDA, every regulatory agency that might care about pharmaceutical price manipulation, started making noise that couldn't be silenced with threats. And through it all, Evelyn stayed beside him, brought him coffee, reminded him to eat, sat in his study while he worked and didn't complain when he talked through his strategy out loud. Just being there, being present, being his partner instead of just his contracted wife. Monday morning, everything exploded. The SEC announced an investigation into Hutchinson Pharmaceuticals. Major news outlets picked up the story. Billionaire Nathaniel Drake exposing corruption in drug pricing, risking his own acquisition to do what was right. Gerald Hutchinson's lawyers issued threats. Nathaniel's lawyers issued responses. The whole thing became national news in a matter of hours. And through it all, the one thing everyone wanted to know was whether Nathaniel Drake's new wife had influenced his sudden attack of conscience. Grace called that afternoon. Every media outlet in the country wants an interview. They want the love story. Billionaire transformed by the power of marriage. Cold businessman finding his heart. It's exactly the narrative we need to counter Gerald's claims that your marriage is fake. So we give it to them, Nathaniel said. He was sitting at his desk, Evelyn perched on the edge beside him. Schedule something, tomorrow if possible. Are you sure? Once you go public with this narrative, you can't walk it back. I'm sure. After Grace hung up, Evelyn looked at him. You know what you just agreed to, right? Selling our relationship as a romance, making it public. No more hiding behind the contract. I know. And you're okay with that? Nathaniel turned to face her fully. I'm okay with telling the truth. That I married you for the wrong reasons, and somewhere along the way you became the right reason for everything. That I'm a better person with you than I was without you. That whatever this started as, it's real now. I'm okay with all of that. Even the part where we have to perform it for cameras? Even that, because it's not really performing if it's true. The interview aired Wednesday night on national television. Evelyn wore a navy dress and tried not to fidget while the interviewer asked questions that had been pre-approved but still felt invasive. Nathaniel held her hand the entire time, and when asked how they fell in love, he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. I didn't think I was capable of loving anyone, he said. I'd built my entire life around not needing people. And then Evelyn walked into it and refused to let me hide. She saw through every defense I had and made me want to be someone worth loving back. So to answer your question, we fell in love because she wouldn't let me not. It was beautiful and honest, and the entire country ate it up. The narrative shifted overnight. Nathaniel Drake wasn't a cold businessman engaged in a contract marriage. He was a man transformed by love, taking on corruption, because his wife had shown him there was more to life than profit margins. Gerald's investigation lost momentum. The board voted to approve Nathaniel's acquisition. The pharmaceutical company restructured, drug prices dropped, and suddenly Nathaniel Drake was a hero instead of a villain. But on Thursday night, when it should have been celebration, Nathaniel came home looking like death. Evelyn found him in his study, staring at nothing. What happened? They found Marcus. Her blood went cold. What? The people I pissed off by going public. They found your brother, grabbed him outside his work. They have him. The room tilted. Where? I don't know. They sent a photo, proof of life, and a message saying I have 24 hours to publicly withdraw from the Hutchinson deal or they start sending pieces of him. Evelyn couldn't breathe. Her brother, the same brother she'd sold 2 years of her life to save, the brother who'd been doing so well, staying clean, building a life. They had him. What do we do? I pull out of the deal. I give them what they want. No. Nathaniel looked at her like she was insane. They have your brother. And if you give in, they win. They learn they can threaten you, and you'll fold. What happens next time? Next acquisition? They'll just take someone else I love and use them as leverage again and again. Her voice was shaking but firm. We find Marcus. We get him back. And we don't let these people win. Evelyn, this is your brother's life, and I know. And he wouldn't want you to give up doing something right just to save him. Neither do I. She grabbed Nathaniel's hands. Trust me. Please. We can find him. You have resources, connections, people who owe you favors. Use them. For a long moment, Nathaniel just stared at her. Then he nodded. Okay, we find him. They spent the night calling in every favor Nathaniel had. Private investigators, former FBI, people who worked in shadows, and asked no questions. By morning, they had a location, warehouse in Charlestown, minimal security, 3 men holding Marcus. I'm going, Nathaniel said. Like hell you are. You're a finance guy, not an action hero. It's my fault he was taken. I'm going. In the end, they both went. Along with 4 very large, very capable men, Nathaniel hired for situations exactly like this. The warehouse was exactly what Evelyn expected. Dark, abandoned, the kind of place bodies ended up. Marcus was tied to a chair in the center of the main floor, one eye swollen shut, lip split, but alive, conscious. When he saw Evelyn, something like relief crossed his face. You shouldn't be here, he called out. Shut up, Marcus. The negotiation was tense, brutal. Money changed hands. Threats were made. At one point, guns were drawn, and Evelyn thought this was it. This was how they all died in a warehouse in Charlestown over a pharmaceutical acquisition. But Nathaniel was calm, cold, every word calculated for maximum impact. He pointed out that killing them would bring federal attention no one wanted, that Marcus was worth more alive as leverage for future deals, that smart criminals knew when to cut their losses. In the end, they let Marcus go. The drive back from the warehouse was silent, except for Marcus's labored breathing in the back seat. Evelyn kept her hand on her brother's arm, checking his pulse like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. Nathaniel drove with white knuckles gripping the steering wheel, jaw tight enough to crack teeth. They took Marcus to a private hospital where Nathaniel had contacts who didn't ask questions. Cracked ribs, the doctor said. Concussion. Bruising that would heal. Nothing permanent. Evelyn sat beside her brother's bed while they stitched up his lip and felt something inside her finally break. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. His good eye was focused on her, the other swollen completely shut. I'm so sorry, Evie. This is all my fault. If I hadn't been such a screw-up... Stop. Her voice came out harder than she intended. This isn't on you. This is on the people who grabbed you. On the system that lets rich assholes manipulate drug prices and threaten people who try to stop them. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did you, but you keep paying for my mistakes. That's what family does. We pay for each other's mistakes, and we survive together. She squeezed his hand. But Marcus, when you're healed up, you're going to therapy. Real therapy, not just saying you'll go. And you're going to figure out why you keep trying to destroy yourself. Deal? Deal. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, still pale, still shaken. They're going to keep him overnight for observation. Security posted outside. No one gets in without clearance. Thank you, Evelyn said. Don't thank me. This happened because of me. This happened because you tried to do something right and it pissed off the wrong people. There's a difference. But she could see the guilt eating at him, the way he couldn't quite look at Marcus without flinching. They left the hospital around 3 a.m. The city was empty, streetlights painting everything in harsh orange. Evelyn's adrenaline had worn off and left behind bone-deep exhaustion. I need to pull out of the acquisition, Nathaniel said as they drove. This proved it. I can't protect you. Can't protect your family. The second I try to do something that threatens their profit margins, they go after the people I care about. So you just give up? Let them win? I keep you alive. That's winning. Evelyn turned to look at him, really look at him. This man who'd bought her as a solution to a problem and somehow become the person she loved most in the world, who was terrified and trying to hide it, who thought protecting her meant surrendering everything he believed in. You know what I learned tonight? She asked. I learned that the Nathaniel Drake I met 3 months ago would have already pulled out of the deal, would have calculated the risk and decided I wasn't worth it. But you didn't. You went into a warehouse with armed men because you couldn't live with yourself if something happened to Marcus. That's growth. That's you becoming someone who cares more about people than profit margins. And it almost got your brother killed. But it didn't. We got him back. And tomorrow, you're going to finish what you started with Hutchinson Pharmaceuticals. You're going to restructure that company and make those drugs affordable, because that's what the new Nathaniel Drake does. He doesn't back down when things get hard. The new Nathaniel Drake is going to get everyone he loves killed. Then we hire better security. We're smarter about protecting the people we care about. But we don't surrender to bullies just because they threw a punch. She reached over, took his hand off the steering wheel, laced their fingers together. I didn't marry someone who gives up. Even if the marriage was supposed to be fake. Something in his expression cracked. It was never fake. Not really. I told myself it was, but I think I knew from the moment you called me out at that first dinner that you were going to ruin me. Ruin you? Ruin my carefully constructed life where I didn't need anyone and nothing touched me. You walked in and demanded I be human, and I fought it because being human is terrifying. But I don't want to go back to who I was before you, even if it means being scared all the time. Good, because you're stuck with me. For 1 year and 8 months, or forever, if you want. The car drifted slightly as Nathaniel's attention snapped to her. What? I'm saying the contract is stupid. I'm saying I don't want a divorce in 1 year and 8 months. I'm saying I want this to be real, fully real. No expiration date, no $1 million payout. Just us figuring out how to build a life together. She took a breath. But only if you want that too. Nathaniel pulled the car over, right there on the empty street, and turned to face her fully. I've spent my entire life avoiding wanting things I couldn't control. Avoiding vulnerability, avoiding risk, and then you happen. And wanting you is the scariest thing I've ever experienced because I can't control it, can't predict it, can't protect myself from it. He cupped her face with both hands. But yes, I want forever. I want to rip up that contract and build something real. I want to be terrified with you instead of alone and numb without you. She kissed him, there in the car on an empty Boston street at 3 a.m, and it felt like the first honest thing either of them had done since signing that contract. So we're doing this? She asked when they pulled apart. For real this time? For real. Even though it's messy and complicated and we have no idea what we're doing, especially because of that. They went home and fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in months, neither of them slept in their designated bedroom. The separate spaces they'd maintained for the sake of professional distance sat empty while they chose to be together instead. The next week was chaos. Federal investigators descended on Hutchinson Pharmaceuticals. Gerald was arrested on fraud charges. The board voted unanimously to approve Nathaniel's restructuring plan. Drug prices dropped within days. News outlets called it the biggest pharmaceutical reform in decades, all because one billionaire had decided profit wasn't worth more than people's lives. And through it all, Evelyn and Nathaniel faced it together. She sat in on meetings where she had no business being, just to be his anchor when things got intense. He came to the care facility with her to visit her father, who was walking now with a cane, and told Nathaniel he'd better treat his daughter right or deal with an old man with nothing to lose. Marcus got out of the hospital and moved into a recovery program Nathaniel paid for. Real therapy, group sessions, the whole thing. He called Evelyn every Sunday and told her about his progress, about the job he'd gotten at a nonprofit, about the life he was finally building that didn't revolve around running from himself. 2 months after the warehouse, Nathaniel came home with papers. "What's this?" Evelyn asked, taking the folder he handed her. "The contract, the original one we signed." He sat beside her on the couch. "I want to destroy it. Not just symbolically, legally destroy it. File the paperwork that says it never existed, that our marriage was never contingent on terms and conditions and expiration dates. And the $1 million? Put it in a trust for your father's care, for Marcus's continued treatment, for whatever you want. It was always yours anyway." He paused. "Unless you want to keep the contract, as insurance, in case I screw this up and you need an exit plan." Evelyn looked at the papers, 47 pages of legal language that had dictated her life for months, that had started as salvation and become a cage. That represented everything wrong about how they'd begun and nothing right about where they'd ended up. She ripped the first page in half. Nathaniel's eyes widened. "Evelyn, I don't need an exit plan. I need you. The real you. Not the version you think you're supposed to be or the one your father wanted you to become. Just the man who went into a warehouse to save my brother. The man who risked everything to do what was right. The man who learned how to be vulnerable even though it terrifies him. She ripped another page. That's the man I married. Contract or no contract. He kissed her, deep and desperate, and they spent the rest of the night destroying the contract page by page until it was nothing but confetti scattered across their living room floor. 3 months later, Nathaniel came home early from work with a strange expression on his face. I did something, he said. Evelyn looked up from her laptop where she'd been researching graduate programs. She'd decided to go back to school, get her master's in physical therapy, maybe teach someday. Nathaniel had been annoyingly supportive, kept leaving brochures for different programs on her desk with notes about which ones had the best reputations. What did you do? I started a foundation. The Drake Family Foundation. Focus on making healthcare accessible to underserved communities. Funding for people who can't afford treatment. Grants for medical research. All the things I should have been doing with my money instead of just accumulating more of it. He sat beside her. I want you to run it. Me? You're the one who made me realize there's more to life than profit margins. You understand what it's like to need help and not be able to afford it. You care about people in a way I'm still learning. So yes, you, if you want it. Evelyn stared at him. Are you serious? Completely. You can still do your master's program. This would be part-time to start, more if you want it to be. But I think you'd be incredible at it, at making sure the money actually helps people instead of just sitting in accounts earning interest. I don't know anything about running a foundation. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together, kind of like everything else. She launched herself at him, kissing him so hard they both fell sideways on the couch. I love you, she said when they came up for air. I don't think I've actually said that yet, but I do. I love you. I love you too, even though you're terrifying and make me feel things I don't know how to process, especially because of that. The foundation launched 6 months later with a gala that was nothing like the stuffy events they'd attended early in their marriage. This one had actual heart, actual purpose. Nathaniel gave a speech about privilege and responsibility and how sometimes you had to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you actually needed. Evelyn stood beside him, 5 months pregnant and glowing, and thought about how far they'd come from that courthouse wedding where they'd shaken hands instead of kissing. The pregnancy hadn't been planned, had terrified them both when the test came back positive, but Nathaniel had held her while she cried happy tears and said maybe this was the universe's way of telling them they were doing something right. That life kept moving forward, whether you controlled it or not. They'd told her father first. He'd cried and said he couldn't wait to be a grandfather. Told Nathaniel he'd better stick around because this baby was going to need a father who knew how to show up. Nathaniel had promised he would, that he was done running from the things that mattered. Marcus had taken the news with surprised joy and immediately started buying baby clothes that were completely impractical. When Evelyn pointed out that newborns didn't need leather jackets, he'd said it was never too early to look cool. She didn't have the heart to argue. Simone had laughed and said she'd told Evelyn that Nathaniel just needed time, that men like him were worth the wait if you were patient enough. Evelyn had hugged her and thanked her for believing in them when she wasn't sure she believed in herself. The night after the foundation gala, Nathaniel found Evelyn on the terrace of the penthouse, looking out at the city. She'd been doing that a lot lately, standing in quiet spaces and trying to process how much her life had changed in less than 2 years. You okay? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, hands settling on her growing belly. Just thinking. About? About how this time 2 years ago, I was drowning. My brother owed money to dangerous people. My father was sick. I was working 2 jobs and still couldn't make rent. I had no idea how I was going to survive. She leaned back against him. And then you showed up with your contract and your cold logic and your completely insane proposal. And I thought I was selling myself. Thought I was giving up my life to save my family. And now I realize I wasn't giving up anything. I was finding everything I didn't know I needed. She turned in his arms to face him. You saved me. Not with the money, with the fact that you saw me as a person worth knowing, worth changing for, worth loving. You saved me first. I was so lost I didn't even know I needed saving. Just kept working and accumulating and telling myself it was enough. You made me want more, want better, want a life that actually meant something. So we saved each other. I guess we did. The baby kicked, strong enough that Nathaniel felt it. His eyes widened. Was that? Yeah, she's been doing that all day. I think she likes the sound of your voice. She? Evelyn smiled. The doctor called this morning. I wanted to wait to tell you in person. It's a girl. Nathaniel's expression did something complicated. Joy and terror and wonder all at once. A girl. We're having a daughter. Are you okay with that? I'm terrified. I have no idea how to be a father, especially to a daughter. What if I screw her up the way my father screwed me up? You won't, because you know what not to do. Because you've spent the last year learning how to be vulnerable and open and human. Because you're nothing like your father. She took his hands, placed them back on her belly. This baby is going to grow up with parents who love her, who show up, who know that money doesn't mean anything if you don't have people who matter. She's going to be so loved, Nathaniel, by both of us. I want to do this right. Then we will, together. They stood there on the terrace as the city lights twinkled below them. Two people who'd started as a transaction and become something neither of them had planned for. Something messy and complicated and absolutely real. 6 months later, Nathaniel proposed. It was ridiculous considering they were already married, but he said the first wedding didn't count because it had been a contract, not a choice. He wanted to ask her properly. Wanted her to have the chance to say yes because she wanted to, not because she was desperate. He did it on the island. They'd gone back for a week, just the two of them before the baby came. Maria and Carlos had prepared the house, stocked it with food, then left them alone. Just like before, except everything was different now. Nathaniel got down on one knee on the beach where they'd first started falling for each other, even though Evelyn was 8 months pregnant and looked like she'd swallowed a basketball. Evelyn Carter Drake, will you marry me? For real this time. Not because of money or contracts or saving anyone, just because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. She was crying before he finished. We're already married, you idiot. I know, but I want to do it right. I want to stand in front of your father and your brother and everyone we care about and promise to love you, not in a courthouse with a judge who looked bored, in front of people who matter, making vows that mean something. Yes, of course yes. The ring was simple, elegant, nothing like the massive diamond he could have afforded, just a thin platinum band with a small stone that caught the light. She loved it immediately. I had it made from metal from the original contract, he admitted. Had them melt it down and turn it into something that actually matters. Symbolic and probably overly sentimental, but she kissed him before he could finish. There on the beach with the sun setting and the ocean crashing and their daughter doing gymnastics in her belly. They renewed their vows 2 months after their daughter was born. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Evelyn's father walked her down a makeshift aisle in the garden of their home, his cane discarded for the day because he was determined to do this right. Marcus stood as Nathaniel's best man, cleaned up and sober and finally becoming the person he was supposed to be. Simone held the baby, who slept through most of the ceremony despite everyone's predictions that she'd scream through it. The vows were different this time. No legal language about obligations and terms, just honest promises about showing up, about choosing each other every day, about building a life that mattered more than the money they had or the success they'd achieved. I promise to keep being terrified of how much I love you, Nathaniel said, voice steady despite the tears on his face. And to keep choosing you anyway, every single day. I promise to keep calling you on your bullshit, Evelyn responded, laughing through her own tears. And to keep believing you're capable of being the person I know you are, even when you forget. They kissed, and everyone applauded, and the baby woke up and started crying, and it was perfect in its imperfection. At the reception, Evelyn's father pulled Nathaniel aside. You know what I thought when you first showed up? When Evelyn told me about your contract? That I was an asshole? That you were broken? That you'd break my daughter too, but I was wrong. He gripped Nathaniel's shoulder with his good hand. You're not broken, you were just lost, and Evelyn helped you find your way. Same way you helped her find hers. That's what love is supposed to do. Make both people better. I'm still terrified I'm going to mess it up. Good. Fear keeps you honest, keeps you trying. Just keep showing up. That's all anyone can ask. Marcus found Evelyn later, baby in his arms, looking at his niece with an expression of pure wonder. She's perfect, he said. Looks just like you. She has Nathaniel's eyes. Yeah, but she got your stubborn chin. This kid's gonna give you hell. He smiled. I'm really happy for you, Evie. You deserve this. All of it. So do you. How's the new job? Good, really good. I'm actually helping people, at the community center, teaching kids about making better choices than I did. It's not much, but it feels like it matters. It does matter. You matter. I know. Finally starting to believe that. He kissed the baby's forehead. Thanks for not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. You're my brother. I couldn't give up on you even if I wanted to. That night, after everyone had gone home and the baby was asleep in her crib, Nathaniel and Evelyn lay in bed together, exhausted and happy. We did it, Evelyn said. We actually pulled this off. What, the wedding? Everything. The fake marriage that became real. The contract that turned into love. The disaster that turned into a life worth living. She rolled to face him. 2 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be here, married to you for real, with a daughter, running a foundation that actually helps people, I would have laughed, would have said that's not how life works. You don't get happy endings when you start from rock bottom. But you did. We did. We made our own ending. That's different. We took something that was supposed to be temporary and empty and turned it into something permanent and full. That's not luck. That's choice. Every day choosing each other even when it would have been easier not to. Nathaniel pulled her closer. Best choice I ever made, marrying you, even when it was for the wrong reasons. The reasons don't matter, just the outcome. Spoken like someone who used to be a physical therapist, very focused on results. Used to be? I'll have you know I'm starting my teaching position next semester. I'm going to be Professor Drake. Show some respect. Professor Drake, I like the sound of that. The baby started crying from the other room. They both groaned. Your turn, Ian, Evelyn said. I got her last time. You got her an hour ago. That doesn't count as last time. It absolutely counts. They argued about it while walking to the nursery, still bickering good-naturedly when Nathaniel picked up their daughter and she immediately stopped crying. He walked her around the room, bouncing slightly, and Evelyn watched from the doorway. This was her life now. Not perfect, not easy, but real in a way nothing else had ever been. A husband who'd learned how to love despite being raised to think love was weakness. A daughter who was already proving to be strong-willed and stubborn. A brother who was finally getting his life together. A father who was healthy and happy. A foundation that was making actual differences in people's lives. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago. Desperate, drowning, willing to do anything to save her family. That woman would have looked at this life and not believed it was possible. Would have thought it was some fantasy that happened to other people. But it wasn't fantasy. It was reality built through choice and effort and refusing to give up even when giving up would have been easier. It was two broken people deciding to be broken together instead of alone. It was learning that sometimes the worst decisions led to the best outcomes if you were willing to fight for them. What are you thinking? Nathaniel asked, noticing her watching them. That I'm happy. Really, genuinely happy. And I don't think I've ever been able to say that before. Me too. He looked down at the baby, who'd fallen back asleep against his chest. I spent my whole life chasing something I couldn't define. Success, approval, achievement. And it was never enough. But this is enough. This is everything. Everything? Everything that matters. The baby made a small noise, content and safe. Evelyn crossed the room, wrapped her arms around both of them, and thought about how far they'd come. From a courthouse wedding that meant nothing to a life that meant everything. From a contract with an expiration date to a love that had no end. 3 months later, the foundation opened its first community health center in South Boston, right in the neighborhood where Evelyn had grown up. Free physical therapy, affordable medication, resources for families who couldn't afford traditional health care. Everything she'd wished had existed when her father got sick, when Marcus was spiraling, when she was drowning and had nowhere to turn. The opening ceremony was packed. Evelyn gave a speech about how health care shouldn't be a privilege, how people deserved access to treatment regardless of their bank accounts, how one person's choice to do something right could ripple out and change entire communities. Nathaniel stood beside her, holding their daughter, looking proud enough to burst. When it was his turn to speak, he talked about second chances, about how he'd built an empire on profit and lost himself in the process, about how the best investment he'd ever made was in people, not portfolios. I used to think success meant accumulating wealth, he said. But I was wrong. Success means using what you have to make things better for people who need it. It means showing up even when it's hard. It means admitting you were wrong and working to do better. He looked at Evelyn. My wife taught me that. She saved me from a life where I had everything and felt nothing, and now I want to spend the rest of my life paying that forward. The center opened to a line of people that stretched around the block, families who needed help and finally had somewhere to go. Evelyn spent the day checking them in, helping them navigate the system, making sure everyone who needed care got it. It was exhausting and overwhelming and absolutely perfect. That night, collapsed on the couch with Nathaniel, watching their daughter sleep in her swing, Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe. Or purpose. The knowledge that the last 2 years of struggle and growth and learning had led to this, a life where she could actually make a difference. I've been thinking, Nathaniel said, dangerous. I want to do more centers, more foundations. Use the money I've spent my whole life accumulating to actually help people. Build something that outlasts us. Leave a legacy that's about more than just wealth. That's ambitious. I learned from the best. He took her hand. Will you do it with me? Build something that matters? I'm already doing it with you, every day. Then let's keep going, keep building, keep choosing each other and choosing to make things better. Deal. Years passed, the foundation grew. More health centers opened across the country. Nathaniel's former business associates called him crazy for essentially giving away his fortune. He told them he was the sanest he'd ever been. The pharmaceutical reforms he'd pushed for became federal law. Drug prices dropped across the board. Lives were saved. Their daughter grew into a fierce, stubborn child who demanded explanations for everything and refused to accept "because I said so" as an answer. She had Nathaniel's sharp mind and Evelyn's empathy, and she was already telling anyone who'd listen that she was going to be a doctor when she grew up so she could help people like Mommy and Daddy did. Marcus got married to a woman he met at therapy, someone who understood recovery and didn't judge him for his past. He became the director of the community center, running programs for at-risk youth, told them his story without shame, showed them that you could mess up your life and still come back from it. Evelyn's father lived long enough to see his granddaughter start kindergarten. He died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family, and his last words were about how proud he was, how his daughter had taken the worst situation and turned it into something beautiful, how that was real strength. At his funeral, Evelyn gave the eulogy through tears, talked about a man who'd raised 2 kids alone and never complained, who'd worked himself sick trying to provide, who'd believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself, who'd accepted Nathaniel not because of his money, but because of how he treated his daughter. Nathaniel held her afterward, let her cry into his chest, reminded her that grief was just love with nowhere to go, that it was okay to fall apart, that he'd hold her together until she was ready to stand on her own again. On their 5th real anniversary, Nathaniel surprised Evelyn with a trip back to the island. They left their daughter with Simone, who'd become family over the years, and escaped for a week of just them. The island hadn't changed. Same White House, same perfect beach, same Maria and Carlos who greeted them like old friends. But everything else was different. They weren't strangers anymore. Weren't 2 people bound by a contract, just 2 people who'd chosen each other every day for 5 years and planned to keep choosing for the rest of their lives. Remember the first time we came here? Nathaniel asked. They were lying on the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky impossible colors. You mean when you were still pretending you didn't feel anything? When you worked 16-hour days and avoided me like I had a contagious disease? I was terrified of you. I know. It was obvious. You were everything I'd spent my life avoiding. Real, emotional, demanding I be human when I'd built my entire existence around not being human. He rolled to face her. Best thing that ever happened to me. You, terrifying me into becoming an actual person. You're welcome. I mean it. I look at our life now, our daughter, the foundation, the work we're doing, and I can't believe this is real, that I get to wake up every day next to you and build something that matters, that I'm not just accumulating wealth and calling it success. You know what I realized? Evelyn said. That contract you wrote, the one we destroyed, it saved us both. Not because of the terms, because it forced us together long enough to realize we didn't want to be apart. If you just asked me on a date like a normal person, I probably would have said no, would have thought you were too rich, too cold, too different, but the contract gave us time to see past the surfaces to who we actually were. So you're saying my completely insane proposal to buy a wife was actually genius? I'm saying desperation makes people do crazy things, and sometimes crazy things work out. That should be the foundation's motto. Desperation makes people do crazy things, and sometimes crazy things work out. Evelyn laughed, the sound carrying across the beach. That's the worst motto I've ever heard. You love it. I love you. The motto is still terrible. They watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the ocean in shades of gold and red and purple. This place where they'd first let their guards down, where fake had started becoming real, where two people who thought they had nothing in common discovered they were exactly what each other needed. I want another baby, Evelyn said suddenly. Nathaniel sat up. What? I want another baby? Our daughter needs a sibling, someone to fight with and protect and drive crazy. Someone who'll remember her when we're gone. You're serious? Completely. I know it's a lot. I know we're busy with the foundation and you're still restructuring companies, and I just started teaching, but I want it. I want our family to grow. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he smiled. Okay. Okay? Just like that? Just like that. You want another baby? We'll have another baby. You want to adopt 17 kids and start our own baseball team? We'll do that too. Whatever you want, Evelyn. Whatever makes you happy. You make me happy. This life we built makes me happy. Another baby would just add to it. Then let's do it. 9 months later, they had a son. He came into the world screaming, stubborn and loud and absolutely perfect. Their daughter took one look at him and declared he was her baby, and no one else could touch him. It took 3 days to convince her that sometimes the baby needed to be with his parents. Marcus visited the hospital with flowers and terrible jokes, held his nephew with shaking hands and whispered promises about being the kind of uncle who showed up, who didn't disappear when things got hard, who taught him that mistakes didn't define you as long as you learned from them. Simone brought food and practical advice and told Evelyn she was glowing despite looking like she hadn't slept in a week, reminded her that this phase was temporary, that soon enough she'd miss the sleepless nights and the constant feeding and the way everything revolved around this tiny human. Nathaniel was a disaster as a new father for the second time, panicked over every cry, every sneeze, every slight change in the baby's breathing pattern. Evelyn watched him transform from a man who used to measure everything in profit margins to someone who measured success in milestones like first smiles and sleeping through the night. I don't know how you do this, he said one night, 3 a.m. feeding, both of them exhausted. How you make it look easy? It's not easy. It's just necessary. They need us, so we show up. That's parenting. That's everything, showing up, choosing to keep showing up even when it's hard. He looked at the baby in his arms. I used to think success was about control, about managing variables and minimizing risk. But this is chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos, and I wouldn't change any of it. Good, because we're in this together for at least the next 18 years. Longer than that, forever. Remember? We promised. Forever, Evelyn agreed. The years continued to pass, marked not by contracts or obligations, but by choices. Choice to keep building the foundation even when it was overwhelming. Choice to keep showing up for each other even when they fought or disagreed or drove each other crazy. Choice to raise their children with honesty about where they came from and what they'd overcome. On their 10th anniversary, Evelyn and Nathaniel stood in the garden of their home, surrounded by family and friends, and renewed their vows again. Not because they needed to, just because they wanted to. Wanted to stand in front of everyone they loved and recommit to the promises they'd been keeping every day anyway. Their daughter, now 7, served as flower girl and took her job very seriously. Their son, 3 years old and chaotic, threw the rings instead of carrying them and made everyone laugh. Marcus stood as best man again, sober for 6 years now, with his wife and their new baby beside him. Evelyn's foundation colleagues came, the families they'd helped over the years, people whose lives had been changed because 2 broken people had decided to build something beautiful together. The vows were simple this time. No need for elaborate promises or grand gestures, just the truth. "I choose you," Nathaniel said. "Every morning when I wake up, every night when I fall asleep, every moment in between, I choose you and I'll keep choosing you until I can't anymore." "I choose you too," Evelyn responded. "The man you were, the man you are, the man you're still becoming, all of it, all of you, forever." They kissed, and their children made gagging noises, and everyone laughed, and it was perfect in all its imperfect reality. That night, alone in their room after the party had ended and the kids were asleep and the house was finally quiet, Evelyn found the remains of the original contract. She'd kept a few pieces, fragments of the document that had changed their lives, tucked in a drawer like memories she didn't want to forget. "Should we throw these away?" she asked Nathaniel. "Finally get rid of the last pieces?" "Keep them, as a reminder." "Of what?" "Of where we started, of how far we've come, of the fact that sometimes the worst decisions lead to the best outcomes if you're brave enough to see them through." He took the fragments from her hands, studied them. This contract was supposed to be the end of something, the end of my emotional isolation, the end of your financial desperation, but instead it was the beginning of us learning how to be real with each other, how to be vulnerable, how to build a life that actually means something. So we keep it. We keep it, and every time we look at it, we remember that love isn't about perfect circumstances or ideal timing. It's about choosing to show up even when everything is wrong, especially when everything is wrong. Evelyn put the fragments back in the drawer, this time with a photo from their real wedding, the one with family and friends and meaning. A visual representation of the journey from transaction to truth. Years later, when their daughter was 18 and getting ready for college, she found the fragments, asked about them. Evelyn and Nathaniel sat her down and told her the whole story. The debt, the contract, the fake marriage that became real, the island where they fell in love, the warehouse where they saved Marcus. All of it. She listened without interrupting, her sharp mind processing every detail. "So you basically married Dad for money," she said when they finished. "Initially, yes," Evelyn admitted, "and Dad basically bought you." "That's one way to put it." "That's insane." "Completely," Nathaniel agreed. "But it worked out. It did. Not because the circumstances were good, because we decided to make it work. We chose each other every day until choosing each other became automatic." Their daughter was quiet, thinking. Then she smiled. "That's actually kind of beautiful, in a completely dysfunctional way. Welcome to our family. Everything is dysfunctional. We just make it work anyway." She hugged them both, fierce and tight, and Evelyn thought about how this was the real legacy. Not the foundation, not the money they'd given away, not the reforms they'd pushed for. This, their children understanding that life was messy and complicated but worth fighting for. That love didn't have to be perfect to be real. That you could start from the worst circumstances and still build something beautiful if you were willing to do the work. On their 20th anniversary, Evelyn and Nathaniel returned to the island one more time. Their children were older now, didn't need them as much. Marcus was running multiple community centers. The foundation was operating in 15 states. They'd built a life beyond anything either of them had imagined that day in the courthouse when they'd shaken hands instead of kissing. They walked the beach where they'd first opened up to each other, sat on the terrace where they'd made love during a storm, remembered who they'd been, and marveled at who they'd become. "No regrets?" Evelyn asked. "About what?" "Any of it. The contract, the fake marriage, The absolute insanity of how we started. Nathaniel thought about it, really thought about it. No regrets, because all of it, the mistakes, the chaos, the desperation that made us do something crazy, all of it led to this, led to us, led to a life I love more than I knew it was possible to love anything. He took her hand. If I could go back and change how we started, make it normal and romantic and socially acceptable, I wouldn't. Because that wouldn't be our story. This is our story. And I love every messy, complicated, beautiful part of it. Me too. They stayed on the island for a week, just the two of them, remembering and dreaming and planning, talking about the next 20 years, the next 40, growing old together, watching their children build their own lives, continuing the foundation's work, leaving the world a little better than they'd found it. On their last night, lying in bed with the ocean sounds drifting through the open windows, Nathaniel said something he'd been thinking for years. Thank you. For what? For refusing to let me hide, for demanding I be human even when I was terrified of it, for seeing something in me worth saving when I thought I was beyond saving, for choosing me every day even when I gave you reasons not to. You did the same for me, saved me when I was drowning, gave me a life I never could have built on my own, showed me that I was worth more than just surviving. She turned to face him in the darkness. We saved each other. That's what love does. It saves you from the person you were and helps you become the person you're supposed to be. Then I guess we're both exactly who we're supposed to be. Together. Always together. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, two people who'd started as a business transaction and became something that couldn't be quantified or controlled or reduced to terms and conditions. They became partners, parents, activists, people who used their privilege to make things better, people who loved each other despite and because of all their flaws. The contract that had brought them together was long gone, destroyed and recycled and turned into a ring that Evelyn still wore every day, a reminder that sometimes the worst decisions led to the best outcomes, that desperation could lead to transformation, that love didn't have to start perfect to become perfect. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated and full of mistakes, but it was real. And real was always better than perfect. Years later, at Nathaniel's funeral, he lived to be 87, surrounded by children and grandchildren and a foundation that had helped millions. Evelyn stood at the podium and told their story one more time. Told it honestly, without hiding the ugly parts. The contract, the transaction, the way they'd stumbled into love instead of falling gracefully. He bought me, she said to the packed memorial. That's the truth. He paid off my brother's debt and I agreed to marry him for 2 years. It was a business arrangement. It was cold and calculated and completely insane. But somewhere in the middle of pretending to be in love, we forgot we were pretending. We became the thing we were supposed to be faking. She looked out at the crowd. Their daughter with her own family, their son who ran the foundation now. Marcus, still sober after all these years. Simone, who'd believed in them from the start. Hundreds of people whose lives had been changed because two broken people had decided to build something together. The lesson isn't that you should marry strangers for money, Evelyn continued, and people laughed through their tears. The lesson is that love can grow anywhere if you give it room, that the circumstances don't matter as much as the choice, that you can start from the worst place imaginable and still build something beautiful if you're brave enough to try. She stepped down from the podium and touched the casket, one last connection to the man who'd changed her life. Thank you, she whispered, for buying me, for saving me, for loving me, for giving me a life I never could have imagined. John. Then she walked back to her seat, surrounded by the family they'd built together, and mourned the loss while celebrating everything they'd created, a foundation that would outlive them both. Children who understood that privilege came with responsibility. A legacy of actually making things better instead of just accumulating wealth. And somewhere, in a drawer in their home, the fragments of that original contract remained, a reminder of where they'd started, a testament to how far they'd come, proof that sometimes the craziest decisions led to the most beautiful outcomes. 2 years later, Evelyn established the Nathaniel Drake Memorial Scholarship, Full ride to college for students from underserved communities who wanted to pursue healthcare or business with the goal of making things better. Every year, 10 kids who thought they had no chance got the opportunity to build the lives they deserved. At the first award ceremony, Evelyn gave a speech about her husband, about how he'd spent the first 35 years of his life chasing the wrong things, about how one desperate decision had changed his trajectory completely, about how he'd spent the rest of his life trying to make up for all the years he'd wasted being numb. He wasn't perfect, she told the scholarship recipients. He made mistakes. He hurt people. He spent decades thinking money was the only thing that mattered. But he learned. He grew. He became someone who understood that real wealth wasn't about bank accounts, but about the lives you touched and the difference you made. And I'm hoping that's what you'll do too. Take this opportunity. Build something beautiful. Make the world better than you found it. The kids listened with wide eyes, probably not understanding yet how much their lives were about to change. Evelyn remembered being that age, desperate, drowning, thinking there was no way out. If someone had told her then that she'd someday be giving scholarships in her billionaire husband's name, she would have laughed. But life was strange like that, full of unexpected turns and impossible outcomes and moments when everything you thought you knew flipped completely. She went home that night to the penthouse that had become a home over the years, walked through rooms full of memories. The couch where she and Nathaniel had first made love during a storm, the terrace where he'd proposed for real, the study where they'd planned the foundation. Every corner held pieces of their story. In her bedroom, she opened the drawer with the contract fragments one more time, looked at the pieces of legal language that had dictated their beginning, thought about everything that had grown from those pages. Then she took out a journal and started writing their story from the beginning. The debt, the proposal, the courthouse wedding, the island, the transformation, all of it. Writing it down so their grandchildren would understand, so future generations would know that their family had started from desperation and become something worth celebrating. She wrote about the first time Nathaniel had looked at her like she was human instead of a line item, about the storm that had broken both their defenses, about the warehouse where they'd saved Marcus, about the foundation that had grown from two people wanting to do better, about a love that had started fake and become the most real thing either of them had ever known. She wrote until her hand cramped and the sun came up, pouring everything onto the page. The truth of their story, messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful. When she finally stopped, exhausted and emotional, she looked at what she'd created. Not a fairy tale. Not a romance novel where everything worked out perfectly. Just an honest account of two broken people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and decided to build something anyway. She titled it simply, The Contract. Then she put it in the drawer with the fragments, closed it, and went to bed. Tomorrow, she'd read it to her daughter, show her grandchildren, make sure the story didn't die with her and Nathaniel, make sure future generations understood that love didn't have to start perfect to become perfect. That was the real legacy. Not the money, not the foundation. The understanding that you could start from nothing, or worse than nothing, and still build a life worth living if you were brave enough to choose it every single day. Evelyn fell asleep in the bed she'd shared with Nathaniel for over 50 years, in the home they'd built together, surrounded by the life they'd created. And she smiled, because even in loss, even in grief, she knew they'd gotten it right. They'd taken a contract and turned it into a love story. They'd taken desperation and turned it into purpose. They'd taken two broken people and built something whole. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything.